Right now, in South Korea, a peculiar digital drama is unfolding within a popular online community called Yeoseo, which translates to Women's Era. This isn't just your average chat forum where people casually share thoughts. It's a space where women allegedly gather to share, critique, and, according to the sources, very publicly dissect the men they encounter. This dissection is particularly focused on those they meet through the increasingly active professional matchmaking services, affectionately or perhaps cynically known as gayojeongsa. This whole situation echoes a shadow from the past, a strikingly similar incident that occurred about 2 years ago. Back then, members of Yeoseo were accused of secretly sharing photos and deeply personal details of men connected to US military bases. Now, in 2026, the pattern appears to be repeating, but with a significantly different, more insidious focus. The current narrative describes posts that seem innocent on the surface, perhaps discussing human instructors for job seekers or some generic professional context. But the author of the report insists this is a thinly veiled tactic, a smokescreen. The real purpose, they claim, is to expose and warn fellow members about specific men deemed unsuitable or problematic. These posts don't just offer vague complaints. They detail names, ages, employers, educational backgrounds, and even offer personal critiques or reveal relationship histories. For instance, one warning goes out about a specific individual, a 92-liner working at Samsung, described as someone who allegedly uses marriage as a lure only to break things off later. Another alert goes out about a 92-liner acupuncturist, supposedly a two-timing womanizer and a network hospital director. Then there is the plastic surgeon, a graduate of Chosun University, who is noted for enjoying woru, a term that often implies a certain lifestyle connected to entertainment, nightlife, or perhaps a perceived extravagant way of living. The author makes a stark comparison, asserting that men on platforms like Dismantle, a well-known online forum, do not engage in this level of systematic, widespread, and highly detailed sharing of personal information about women. And here's the kicker: according to the report, Yeoseo, despite these alleged activities that sound quite serious, continues to operate openly without facing significant repercussions or shutdowns. It's presented as a stark, almost defiant contrast to how such actions might be handled elsewhere, raising questions about accountability. But here's what nobody is talking about. Why would an entire community dedicate itself to cataloging and critiquing men in such granular public detail? The answer, if we're to be blunt and look at the raw, unvarnished human psychology at play here, points towards the ultimate problem, the very nature of existence within a hyper-competitive, often ruthless capitalist market. Everything, and I mean everything, becomes commodified. People, relationships, even intensely personal information, it's all just currency in an aggressive, constant fight for survival and a better share of the financial pie. In this system, individuals aren't just people with feelings and complexities, they're analyzed as assets, liabilities, or potential investments. The pressure to secure one's future, especially in a society like South Korea where financial stability and social standing are paramount, is immense. This environment breeds an almost predatory mindset, where strategic decisions, including those about partnership and marriage, are less about genuine emotional connection and more about calculated gain. The deeply ingrained Korean concept of chujip, essentially meaning marrying up or marrying into wealth and status, becomes a central driving strategy for many. It's not just about finding a partner you love, it's about securing a financial future, a status upgrade, a golden ticket out of the relentless rat race. When this strategy, this calculated pursuit of a beneficial union, fails, when the investment doesn't pay off as expected or turns out to be fundamentally flawed, the reaction isn't just simple disappointment. It's experienced as a form of direct financial loss, a failed transaction in a high-stakes game. And in a marketplace where everyone is aggressively fighting for their peace, the logical, albeit cold, response to a failed deal can be to share the negative data, to publicly discredit the defective product so others don't make the same costly mistake, effectively trying to salvage some value by preventing others from suffering their own financial ruin. It's a cold, hard economic calculation applied to the most intimate human connections, turning romance into a boardroom decision. So, what's the specific cultural context that allows this phenomenon to flourish and take root so deeply? Well, imagine a society where the stakes for winning at life, for achieving stability and success, are incredibly high, almost existential. There's this immense pervasive pressure, particularly on women, to achieve financial security and a certain social status, and often the most direct and visible path perceived is through marriage. It's less about finding a soulmate and more like a high-stakes game show where the grand prize is a life of comfort, security, and upward mobility. The matchmaking services Yeoseo are essentially the intermediaries, the brokers in this high-stakes market of human connection. They meticulously facilitate these transactions, bringing together potential investors and carefully vetted assets. But when the perceived dating pool feels limited, or when the overwhelming pressure to find the right partner, meaning the most financially secure and socially advantageous one, becomes paramount, people start sharing intel. The Yeoseo community, therefore, acts like a private, women-only intelligence network for its members. They're not just sharing casual dating tips or complaining about bad dates. They're sharing what they consider classified intel on potential partners, compiling dossiers on men. This creates a unique social dynamic where individuals are constantly being vetted, judged, and ranked not by their personality or kindness, but based on their perceived market value and potential risk as an investment. It's a stark reflection of a society that has, to a significant degree, commodified human relationships, turning potential partners into stock options. The chujip ambition, combined with the relentless capitalist drive to gain any possible advantage, essentially turns dating into a highly competitive sport where every interaction is intensely analyzed for potential profit or loss. The horror mentioned in the context of the plastic surgeon, it hints at a lifestyle that might be perceived as high spending or perhaps a bit decadent, traits that women might be looking for in a wealthy partner, or conversely warning others against if they're seeking stability over flash. It's a world where a man's worth is often reduced to his financial indicators and his perceived romantic performance as an asset. Here's the part that completely broke people's brains, and it's where the cold logic of capitalism inevitably punishes these naive, contradictory demands. The author points out the sheer hypocrisy. Here's a community that allegedly denied any knowledge of a past scandal involving sharing sensitive information, yet they are now actively engaged in a similar, perhaps even more systematic practice of exposing personal details. It's like a chef who loudly condemns food poisoning while secretly serving tainted meals from their own kitchen. The sheer audacity is staggering. They demand discretion and a fair shake in their pursuits, but when their strategic pursuit of a wealthy partner goes south, they don't hesitate to resort to public shaming and doxing. And the system, the very capitalist structure that fuels this intense competition for resources and status, doesn't reward this behavior with fairness, but with its own brutal, unforgiving logic. Men are told they don't do this on platforms like dismantle. They don't engage in this widespread community-sanctioned cataloging and public vilification of women though dated. Yet, the Yeoseo community, seemingly engaging in the mirror image of this behavior, continues to operate freely and openly. The author frames this as a system that allows such behavior to persist, thereby creating a perverse incentive structure. The women are, in essence, shooting themselves in the foot. By treating relationships as purely transactional and by engaging in public character assassination when a transaction fails, they are eroding trust and demonstrating that their own demands for fairness are conditional at best. They want all the benefits of a commodified dating market without facing its ultimate consequence, being commodified and discarded themselves, or being publicly exposed for their own predatory tactics in the same marketplace. The fallout from all this? Well, the author is essentially sounding the alarm, positioning themselves as the lone voice revealing this hidden systematic behavior. They contrast the alleged actions of Yeoseo members with men on platforms like dismantle, claiming men simply don't engage in this kind of organized outing and shaming of women they've encountered. While dating horror stories are a global phenomenon, the systematic community-wide effort to share personal identifying information, driven by the specific goal of chujip and its subsequent failures, appears to be a uniquely South Korean flavor of this market-driven interaction. It's a far cry from simply venting about a bad date. This is about leveraging personal data as a weapon in a highly competitive social and financial arena. It highlights a particular kind of societal pressure and a way of navigating it that, while perhaps extreme, is rooted in universal anxieties about status and security that manifest differently across cultures. If this continues, what does the future hold? We're likely looking at an even more atomized, transactional, and data-driven landscape for human connection. Imagine dating apps where every interaction is logged and analyzed, creating a permanent risk profile for every potential partner. Relationships will become less about emotional connection and more about risk assessment and return on investment. Every day could be seen as a mini investment, and a breakup becomes a bad investment that needs to be reported to the relevant shareholders, the online community. We might see a future where personal information is meticulously catalogued, not by a government, but by the collective, driven by self-interest, turning the search for love into a highly efficient, cold, and calculated business operation. Ultimately, what does this whole bizarre saga remind us of? It's a sharp, almost comical metaphor for the human condition itself when it's viewed solely through the lens of a marketplace. It's like everyone is trapped in a cosmic game show where the prize is a stable life. But to win, you have to constantly reveal embarrassing secrets about everyone else you encounter, turning genuine human connection into a commodity to be bartered and traded. In this grand bazaar of souls where love and security are just more goods on the shelf, The pursuit of personal gain leads to absurd, often hypocritical, outcomes that reveal the cold, hard logic of a world where everything, it seems, has its price. Fuel the truth at dating in Korea. Support the structure. Stay safe in the lounge.